I'd like to introduce now Mark Robson, who's our General Manager, but he is also responsible for our HR area, and also he's getting very involved in the one-touch payroll that's coming in as part of his HR role. So he's just going to talk to us a bit about some of the pitfalls he finds in the HR area and also one-touch payroll and what it's going to mean. So I'll pass you over to Mark. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, John, for the introduction there this evening. Now, first of all, thank you all for attending today or this evening. The speakers today have been fantastic and most informative. As John indicated, my name is Mark Robson, and by way of background, I've been with Sinclair Wilson for 18 years, working, and over that time I've worked in the majority of our service lines, including some audit, self-managed super, tax, HR, and now fulfil the role of the General Manager for the practice. A young family certainly keeps me busy, along with my interests in AFL, cricket and tennis. And I've had a renewed passion for fitness, which will see me return to complete the stadium stomp at the MCG in July this year. And that'll be 7,500 stairs, 7,500 stair climb through the grandstands of the MCG. So who could say that accountants are boring? This evening I will provide some insight into the following items. Single-touch payroll, record keeping, changes to the privacy legislation, and an update on the Fair Work Ombudsman and their areas of focus. Single-touch payroll will change the way employers process their payroll in the future. Employers will be required to report their payroll and their superannuation information after processing each payroll. Therefore, if you have a weekly payroll, that'll mean 52 communications to the ATO. Fortnightly payroll, a little bit easier, but 26 communications to the ATO. The single-touch payroll will require an electronic file to be uploaded via a gateway that will be provided by your software provider. So a lot of interesting terminology coming out here, and the difficulty we have at this early stage, whilst as I'll get to the time frame shortly, a lot of it we cannot actually demonstrate to businesses and employers at this time. Many of the software providers are actively working on the format, the required formats, for release prior to 30th of June. However, these providers must meet some strict ATO guidelines. Some of the positives coming out of the introduction of single-touch payroll, we'll see the real-time reporting. So therefore, after each payroll, this will enable your business activity statements to be pre-filled with the W1 and W2 figures, but rest assured the ATO have indicated that the figures can be amended if required. This real-time reporting may also see the end of the payment summaries, the good old group certificates many of you will recall there. Given that the information is going to be readily collected on a weekly, fortnightly or monthly basis through those regular submissions with our payroll, it'll enable individuals to be able to see their payment summary information via the MyGov, their MyGov account. So again, a push, I guess, by the government to get everyone into an electronic environment in the longer term. I'm slipping here on the slides. Okay, there we go, there's my W1 and W2. So the all-important time frames. So it was definitely no April Fool's Day joke that employers needed to address their staffing numbers on the 1st of April 2018, which happened to be a Sunday. Employers with 20 or more employees on the 1st of April 2018 must be ready for single-touch payroll by the 1st of July 2018. Employers with less than 20 employees, they have until the 1st of July 2019 to be ready. However, there is the opportunity for those smaller employers to start sooner if they wish. The ATO will have sufficient data at their fingertips, I guess, to ascertain how many employers they expect to be engaged in the single-touch payroll process effective 1 July, given that we have all been lodging payment summary information for a number of years, and they'll be able to gather that information quite readily. So they're going to have a pretty good understanding of what is there to be expected. I guess by way of interest, it's kind of a little bit of a straw poll across the audience. How many of us would fit into the large employer classification? There's a couple of hands appearing there. Yep. Therefore, I'll assume the balance will be fitting into the smaller employer category. So it is going to be an interesting stage or time frame, I guess, coming up, and obviously those people in the room that have expressed their position where they are a large employer. Again, I'm happy to talk with you all at the conclusion of tonight's proceedings if you need some more in-depth information as to where you may sit at this time. So whether you're required to enter the single-touch payroll regime in 3 months or in 15 months' time, there is no reason to delay. It's important to start looking and assessing your position now. What we've sort of been talking to our clients about to date, assessing how the payroll function is managed at the present time. There will be some clients out there and some businesses that will be running manual payroll systems. There will be some employers out there also using their payroll software. But it's important to know whether or not that software is going to be, I guess, in the right format to allow you to comply with the ATO requirements. And I only heard today there was one particular software product, it wasn't a very well-known product, and that they've indicated that they will not be compliant. So I've got a situation with an employer who's now going to have to look at what other payroll solutions are out there so that they can be compliant come 1 July. We also need to look at the assessment of the content, assessing the content of our payroll software. It'll be important to ensure that any of the electronic software products that we do use have all the correct fields included and filled. So tax file numbers, dates of birth, superannuation information are all going to be key items that need to be in the software. I've seen over the years, software products that don't have all that information, and what we're going to end up is, if we haven't got that key information available to us, it's going to make it difficult for those files to be submitted through to the ATO. So having a look at all of these key areas now is highly recommended. As I said, whether you have to be ready for 1 July this year or in 15 months' time when we roll into July 2019. To make the single touch payroll a success in your business, it may be it's likely to require some involvement of several people. It can be some HR expertise. It can be some IT people to provide that setup and establishment of the right software. But also talking to your accountant is going to be important to make sure that the systems in place are going to fit your business needs. And that's why I sort of see the people with the most working knowledge of the business, that's going to be you as the business owner and the business operator, and you will have a key role to play to make sure that this transition is a success. Payroll is often our biggest expense on our profit and loss, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say that. We then also look at our people as being our most important asset within the business. So managing your payroll and your HR responsibilities needs to be one of your top 3 priorities as a business owner, manager out there today. Obviously, Sinclair Wilson, we can work with clients from all industries and all sizes to ensure that the people aspect of the business is managed to the highest standard. I sort of referred to that there as well. Okay, so what I'll move into now is just a little bit of a snapshot on some record keeping, but a general HR background information for you all this evening. And record keeping is probably going to be one of the more important aspects of for an employer to consider going forward. And I guess it's as an interesting side note, I've put a couple of examples up here that we can have a look at, and it'd be interesting to know your thoughts whether you, if you're confronted with these situations, whether you'd be able to give an answer quite quickly. So we might have an employee, Frank Smith. He wants to know what his long service leave entitlement is. Where is his commencement date? Have we had those questions posed to us over the years? Kylie Green has had a break in her continuous service. Did Kylie go overseas for 4 months or was it 14 months? She still thinks she's entitled to long service leave. Again, can be a common question that's raised. Did Mandy Brown take the full 12 months for maternity leave, or did she return earlier after 7 months on a part-time basis before she resumed full-time? Again, more complex situations that can arise. And finally, Bruce James thinks his annual leave and his sick leave accruals are not right. That doesn't matter, does it? How can we work out what leave he has taken? So the important thing coming out of those slides is it's important to have some documentation and records behind your payroll, so that these situations present, that anyone can come into your business and assess where your leave entitlements may be. Has someone got an entitlement to long service leave? We've got different legislation in our different states around Australia, so it's not a hard and fast simple answer. And I probably find that with long service leave, there's not too many payroll software products out there that can accurately calculate a long service leave entitlement. So that's always important to keep in mind. And I suppose myself, I always find going back to the old pen and paper, if you've got all the facts, the start dates, the breaks in continuous service, the leave taken, you can certainly piece together a leave entitlement without too much trouble. File notes are also very important. Again, from a performance management perspective in any business, documenting those discussions that you have with your employees is strongly recommended. Again, it just gives you some background and basis to work with if you need that documentation down the track. And as I'll refer to a little bit later, that's where, if anyone ever runs into difficulties with fair work, that documentation becomes very, very important. Being clear with your employees at the commencement of their employment is vital. It sets the agenda to the expectations of the employment engagement. Documents such as your letter of offer, your tax file number deck, super choice form, the personnel details form are all important and need to be documents retained either in an electronic environment, so securely stored that way, or in the old filing cabinet if that's still a chosen option. It's important to ensure that the employees know and understand their policies or the business policies from the starting point, because it certainly makes reinforcement of those policies in the longer run a lot more straightforward. I guess I've probably sown the seeds a little bit tonight for you to review some of your payroll systems, and it might also be an appropriate time to review your workplace policies. Some of the more common policies that we see today within the workplaces, we have our confidentiality agreements, which is important, harassment, OH&S, uniform, motor vehicle policies, dispute resolution procedures are important, as well as your social media and IT usage policies. So a lot of the situations I've come across over time where there may be an issue within the workplace, an employee comes along and they're not happy about something, you might be wanting to performance manage them or talk to them about a particular issue. If you don't have your policies in place, it becomes very difficult to, enforce your position if the employees are not aware of what the expectations were at the start. So if we look at a social media type policy, if there's no policy that exists in your business and an employee starts, putting some negative posts out on Facebook, whether it could be harassing another employee, negative feedback about the business itself, if there's no social media policy, it becomes very difficult for an employer to act on that employee. So having your policies in place from day one and communicated clearly to the employees is of great importance. That moves me along to talking about some changes in our privacy legislation. And as I said, we've just gone and collected all this personal information about our staff, and what we now have is some changes to the privacy legislation here in Australia, and the introduction of the notifiable data breaches scheme. Now, this scheme came into effect in February, mid-February this year, and it will apply to businesses and not-for-profit organisations with turnover of $3 million or more. It will apply to data breaches that involve personal information that is likely to result in serious harm to any individual affected. This can apply to our employee records, but other confidential personal information which businesses may hold in respect of its customers and clients. So as I just mentioned there, we've collected a lot of personal information. Again, as employers and business operators, we do have tax file numbers at our disposal, we have addresses, we have bank account details, we have dates of birth, we have phone numbers. All of that information could be would fit our definition of private information to the individuals, and we must have appropriate steps and measures in place to ensure that information is kept private and and that there's no risk to any data breaches occurring. We need to ensure that this information is protected, and the key focus is the risk of identity theft. So an eligible data breach is a breach that would require reporting to the Australian Information Commissioner. An eligible data breach arises when the following three criteria are satisfied. There is an unauthorised access to or unauthorised disclosure of personal information, or a loss of personal information that an entity holds. This is likely, this is likely to result in serious harm to one or more individuals, and the entity has not been able to prevent the likely risk of serious harm with remedial action. A classic example of where this could come into play is if there was the group certificate or payment summary, and if I was in a role of a manager's position, and now if I emailed, and I'll pick on John Miles who's right in front of me, if I was to email the payment summary for John Miles to another employee in error, that would not be a deemed reportable breach of the privacy rules there. However, if I did send John's payment summary to the entire staff, so 120 people, let's say, that could be deemed a more serious breach because of where that information has gone, and there must be steps in place to reduce the risk of that information being channelled out any further. So John personally, he might take great offence and be quite up in arms about that situation. So it's then the employer's responsibility to manage that situation and have some remedies in place to reduce the risks in the longer term. So it's definitely one that has crept up on a lot of people, this change to the privacy legislation, but it is going to be very important. And again, I've probably have you all on edge a little bit, thinking about your systems and what policies you have in place. So it might be something to start to consider as well in reviewing your current privacy policies that you have in place at the moment, and that can lead to your IT security as well. And we just need to make sure that there are some robust systems that are in place to reduce that risk of data breach occurring. I've covered off, so IT security is important, and be proactive in preventing any forms of identity theft from your workplace. And finally, I'm going to just give you a brief rundown on where our friends at the Fair Work Ombudsman's office are sitting. Again, I might get a quick show of hands from the room if I could. Has anyone had dealings with Fair Work in recent times? One there, a couple over the back there. So it's a real issue, and I think where every employer out there at some stage will have some dealings with Fair Work, I expect. It will be over minor matters, but some will be over much more serious matters. And I guess it comes down to the what relationships and ground rules, I guess, you can set with your staff from day one that can reduce the risk of matters ever arising and going to Fair Work. Obviously, Fair Work's an organisation that we would all prefer to avoid, but their role is important to ensure that our workers are receiving their correct wage rates and other entitlements. Fair Work, they are continually undertaking audit activity, and there are a number of key areas that they are focusing on at the moment, that being the record keeping, the provision of pay slips to employees, underpayments of wages, sham contracting, and general Fair Work conduct, so just the way that we do engage with our staff within the workplace. The sham contracting is an interesting one, and that comes up where you may have contractor engagements that do appear to look more like an employee-employer relationship. So they, I suppose contractors can be a very grey area, and it can be often difficult to ascertain where the legal boundaries start and where they do finish. So it is a case-by-case situation in respect to those contractors. Whilst the disputes will arise with the employees from time to time, it is our preference, I guess, that such issues can be resolved amicably without the need for Fair Work involvement. However, an employee can go to Fair Work for assistance in that dispute resolution process, and the mediation process that we then have to follow is designed to achieve a settlement. If settlement cannot be achieved in the mediation, there are then further avenues for the employees to explore, and that can lead to some court action, which can be quite expensive once you need the involvement of some lawyers and alike. And again, that'd be something, looking at you all here tonight, I wouldn't want anyone here in the room to have to go down that path, I guess, with working with dispute resolution through a court process when we're dealing with employment entitlements. Over the years, I have worked with a number of employers to guide them through the mediation process, and the outcomes have been quite reasonable, but being prepared, well-resourced, and just keeping those emotions in check throughout that mediation process will ensure that an amicable resolution can be achieved. Whilst my presentation might have been a little bit shorter than some, that does bring my notes there to a conclusion, but I'm happy to field any questions that you may have, or happy to speak with you all at the conclusion of tonight's proceedings. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you for that, Mark. It's a growing area, HR, so we're lucky to have you on board, and I guess that's one of the reasons why we have so many people, because what we need to go is just expanding so much that we just need people around with specific experience. One question I've got, with the one-touch payroll and the 1st of April that we've already had,
Yep.
what's the position with casual employees in the number count?
No, good question there, John. And it comes back to the number of casuals that you did employ during the course of the month of March.
Yeah.
So you'd basically, for simplicity, and I said there'll be some employers will be right over it, there'll be some that'll be right under it, and it won't be a major issue. However, it's important to probably look at probably an averaging exercise through that month of March, where you did have some casual employees that may have affected the numbers.
Yeah. And seasonal are the same?
There are some exemptions available for those that have seasonal workers. And again, I didn't come prepared for that question, John. But if anyone who does want some further information on that, I'm happy to talk to you at the end of the evening.
Yeah. Terrific. Thanks for that, Mark.
No worries, thank you.